Next to Westchester County, where a Mamaroneck man murdered in cold blood while he was in his own apartment. Police suspect he may have even known his killer. But 10 years after he was killed, the murder of Stephen Spina still unsolved, and his killer, well, most likely still on the loose. Files 1 News and the Journal News, they are taking a closer look at this cold case. Here's Files 1's Romano.
SKYLER Spina remembers it like it was yesterday.
I screamed super loud.
That September day when her mother told her her father was no longer alive. 12 years old at the time, SKYLER reflects on her father's murder 10 years later.
He played here more than umpired here.
On a special bench dedicated to her dad at the Harbor Island Park ball fields, a place she says her father loved to be.
I think this year is harder than most years because it has been almost a decade. So it's harder this year than most others.
The heartache and emptiness remain, but the determination to find her father's killer helping to propel her forward. On September 17, 2007, SKYLER's father, Stephen Spina, the beloved Larchmont postal worker, repeatedly stabbed inside his apartment. And now the Journal News revisiting this cold case. Investigative reporters Mark Longariello and Chris Eberhardt spending weeks looking into the decade-old murder.
The innocence of Mamaroneck was sucked away as a result of what happened behind us, right?
They like to call it the friendly village, and it seemed a little less friendly after this. There's no doubt about that.
It was a bright Monday, a day off for Stephen Spina. What was supposed to be a day of relaxation, lunch with his girlfriend, and a nighttime Yankees game with the love of his life, his daughter SKYLER, instead was a day of horror. Police say Spina was murdered in cold blood sometime during the mid-morning hours.
It's one that bugs me, obviously, the most.
Detective Rich Carroll got the call to 300 Rich Bell Road and was among the first to see the crime scene.
So many people that live on that block. And we had very, very few witnesses to really anything.
10 years later, and the building where this gruesome murder took place still hasn't changed. There's an eerie yet serene quiet that's still so ever apparent here. It's that same silence that has detectives working this case extremely frustrated.
Even though we feel like we did everything we could have, the bottom line is there's somebody out there that didn't, it's not in jail. So you kind of feel like you didn't do your job.
Yet Detective Carroll has been relentless in his attempt to find Spina's killer.
All of Stephen's telephone records, cell phone records, analysis.
Collecting box loads of evidence and case files, interviewing hundreds of people, including persons of interest.
There's a couple of people that we've been looking at, digging into some of our older suspects, re-looking into them, and now looking into some, friends of theirs, relatives of theirs.
Investigators haven't made public several critical details about the murder. They have not revealed the weapon used, nor the number of times Spina was stabbed. Journal News reporter Chris Eberhardt has been following this case for more than 2 years.
There aren't as many witnesses. Memories aren't as good as they were before. People that might have known something might not be living in the village anymore. Some of the evidence is stale.
And what makes this investigation more difficult, there was no forced entry into Spina's apartment, and nothing was stolen, leaving police to surmise that more than likely Spina knew his killer.
Somebody knows something. There's no doubt in my mind that someone knows something. They're a little scared, or they have some involvement.
Investigators say Spina was a beloved family and community man who everyone in the village knew, making this murder mystery more puzzling.
It's an open wound for the village. 10 years later, they still talk about it, they still wonder about it, and they all still hope for some kind of closure.
So too is Spina's daughter SKYLER, and although she has coped with her father's murder, she has no doubt his killer will be found.
Just because it's 10 years doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. It could take another 10 years, but it's going to happen eventually.
And Spina's family not giving up hope that his killer will be off the streets and brought to justice. In Mamaroneck, Romano, Files 1 News.
The Mamaroneck Police Department and Spina's family, they're offering a nearly $50,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest and conviction for the murder of Stephen Spina. You can learn much more about this story by heading over to loha.com starting tomorrow. A special report will also be available in the Journal News this Sunday, September 17th, the exact day of Stephen Spina's death 10 years earlier. Coming up next, we will sit down with two Journal News reporters who are digging into this cold case in Mamaroneck. Speaking of cold cases, a possible break in the Gilgo Beach murders on Long Island, a case that has baffled police for years.